My name's Cody and you're watching Lunch Ride. Previously on Lunch Ride, I built this kicker and lander set that I wanted to keep outside because I didn't have a lot of room in the garage. I made them out of treated lumber and I really built them to last, and they have. But the problem is that they're heavy and they're hard to move. Lately, I've been seeing these really cool looking kickers that look like they're made out of CNC cut plywood. And after looking into it, I found out that they're pretty expensive and it looks like they take forever to assemble with a lot of small parts. And I've been wanting a new kicker ramp, but I've been wanting something that's a little bit more portable than my last build. But I don't want to build the same kicker that's on every other YouTube channel. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There's a reason they're as popular as they are. They're cheap, they're strong, and they're easy to build. I wanted to build something that would be more portable, that would fold down, and didn't have a million steps for assembly like the CNC cut kickers. But I'll be totally honest, I saw the ramp that the Lone Ranger just made with the adjustable lip, and I was totally on board with that. So I'm copying it, or stealing it. Intellectual property theft is the highest form of flattery, right? Right? So this is what I've come up with. First of all, the adjustable lip. My first thought was just to get it out of the way and have it store flat. But when I saw the Lone Rangers, I thought I would add some settings to it to allow for some adjustability. Next is the floating entryway. What this does is allow the ramp to sit on a variety of surfaces without having to do any leveling or kicking of dirt around to get it to sit flat. So speaking of flat, the whole impetus for designing the ramp like this was so that it would fold up easily. Let me show you how to do that. All you have to do, flip it over, take the spreader out. Now it's flat and easy to store against the wall. So let me show you how I did this. So I'll be honest, this is my most complicated design that I've done. There are a lot of parts to it, but it's not that difficult. We don't have to swing a radius. There's no curved cuts. All the calculations have been done. As long as you're careful with your measurements, your marking, and your cuts, this is a doable project. So the first pieces that we're gonna cut are the main sides of the ramp. I'm gonna start by cutting this point down here. It's much easier to cut the straight end accurately than it is the angled end. So I like to cut the angled side first and then pull the final measurement from that. Now the angle that we cut has a nice edge to hook our tape to. And we need to measure out to 42 5/8. So now I'm gonna do the same thing with the legs and the brace. I'm gonna cut them a hair long, and then I'm gonna make the final cut with them together so that they're exactly the same length. Now, while I have the side pieces together, I'm going to lay them out and mark them for where the bolt holes go and where the cross pieces will attach. So while I'm here, I'm also going to mark out the holes for the pin that makes the ramp adjustable. It's a little bit of tedious work, but take your time, it'll be okay. The high side, set that to 3 inches. Now it's time to drill some holes. If you ever tried to drill right on a mark, you might have noticed that it's kind of hard to keep the bit right where you want it when you start the drill up. It has a tendency to walk. One way to combat this is to take a awl, a punch, or even a nail, put it right on the mark, and create a little divot. That way the bit has something to bite into initially. So next, I've cut some feet, and that seems pretty simple. However, they're going to be attached to the ramp with dowel pegs, and you can then pull them out to remove them so that the legs can fold up. Now the holes I'm going to drill in these need to be as straight and parallel as possible. If you have a drill press, this will make this process a lot easier, but I don't have one here. So I've made a simple jig to try to drill the holes as straight as possible. Let me show you. So this piece here I've screwed to the table, and then I've taken the leg, it's upside down right now, I've taken the leg and made that flush with the top and clamped it to that block. And then the foot, I've centered it to the leg and made sure it's right where it needs to be, and I've clamped that to the table. So we're going to drill through the foot, and then the dowel is going to extend into the leg another 1.5 inches, so that that's 1.5 inches and another 1.5 inches, 3 inches. Now to get our depth right, we'll measure 3 inches on our drill bit and put a piece of tape. Now we know where to stop. The big trick with the whole thing is making sure that we drill straight. And it's easier said than done, but let me show you something that might help. So I've already punched little holes to help this bit guide into place, and I can start drilling now. But I want to make sure that it's straight up and down in every way that I can. I can eyeball it by looking from side to side, or I can start off at least by taking another block, and I've drawn a line with my square. I set that on the block like this, line up straight this way, and then line up straight that way, and I've got a pretty good chance that that's going to be nice and vertical. And once I get it traveling, it'll kind of go on its own path from here. So now the foot has holes, and I have some 1/2 inch dowels that I cut to 2 3/4 and place those in the holes like that. I'm going to glue them in, and then the foot will attach like that. I'm going to glue those in and set them aside for a minute. So the joint for the leg is a bit tricky. I mean, we could place a screw here and get a pretty good bite. But without toe nailing, which is ugly, or pocket holes, which isn't very strong, the only way to get a good bite between the two pieces here and here is to countersink these screws. We'll find a bit that's just a little bit larger than the head of the screw, and we'll mark how deep we want to drill here and here. Now we really do want the best joint possible for the legs, so I'm going to set them up on the table, and I'm going to clamp it in place while I run some screws in. So now I've cut 3 cross pieces that are 27 inches each. 2 of them will be right under the deck. The other one is going to be the spreader for the feet. So with the 3 cross pieces I've cut, 2 are going to go here. 1 I need to keep in a safe place so I don't mistake it for scrap and cut it up later. Now that the main deck of the ramp is built and I can stand up like this, we're going to attach the hinges. First we'll set where the leg needs to go. Now I've got this set up, I want to mark roughly where the hinges are going to go. And now I want to take the leg out of the way and make sure that the hinge is flush and straight with the edge. I'm going to mark the center where each screw is going to go. That first one in, I want to make sure that hinge is right where I want it, and then I'll put the second one in. Now that the hinges are on the main part of the body, it's time to attach the leg. The big issue is that I want that leg as tight against the body as possible. If there's a little bit of a gap that leaves for a little bit of play when it's extended, that will cause the ramp to wiggle, and that will only get worse over time. I just have 2 screws in because I want to make sure that the hinges don't bind or fight each other. That's pretty awesome. I'm going to put the rest of the screws in. Now the same thing for the other side. So next I'm going to take the feet that we set aside with the dowels, plug them back into the legs, and then we're going to set the cross brace. So now I have it where I want it. Make sure it's all squared up with my square. And to screw it in, I'm going to scoot a foot off the table and screw it in from below. And do the same thing for the other side. So next, to keep this frame in square while we're working on everything else, I'm gonna add the plywood to it now. So I've gone ahead and cut the side pieces for what I'm calling the entryway to the ramp. This cut here is going to be the most difficult cut in the project. You can do this with a circular saw or a jigsaw. I used the table saw with a miter fence. These angles here you just measure 7/8 of an inch and cut a 45 on each, and take extra care locating the hole here. But I'm not really worried about this angle too much. The reason being is that I'm going to be using this on the grass or the dirt mostly. It's not going to sit flat anyway. And also, this point doesn't have to fade off into nothing. It can be the width of a 2x4 and a mountain bike will just roll right over that. So it doesn't have to fade down to 0. And again, once I cut this angle and got it exactly how I wanted it, then I pulled the measurement from here to here to get the final length. I also went ahead and cut the adjustable lip side pieces as well. They're a lot less complicated than the entryway pieces. Now it's time to cut the cross braces that go in between the adjustable sections of our ramp. However, even though that measurement is on the drawings, I want to double check because real world scenarios don't always line up with drawings. So in order to do that, I'm going to put the ramp on its side and I'm going to place the two side pieces, just stack them up like that. And then in between, I'm also going to have a total of 4 washers. So I'll take 4 washers that I bought and set them there as well. And then I'm going to measure this distance, and that's going to be the width of the cross pieces. 23 5/8. Now the reason that I do that is the measurement on the drawing says 23.5. That's because it assumes that the 2x4s are going to be an exact 1.5 inches and that the washers are going to be an exact 1/8 of an inch thick. That's not always the case. The wood can be of varying thicknesses and so can the washers depending on manufacturers or whatever. So double checking this measurement will give me a more accurate cut. I also need to check if there's a difference between the top and the bottom and cut accordingly. 23 5/8 there too. Now the upper and lower sections are assembled, but I don't want to put the plywood on yet. I want to put all the pieces together and then put the plywood on. That way I can make sure that the plywood is in alignment throughout the ramp and cover up anything that's askew when I put it together. Everything's going to be bolted with these 1/2-inch bolts. They're, what are they, 4-inch long 1/2-inch bolts. And the way that they're going to go on is they're going to have a washer on the outside, 2 washers in between, another washer on the outside, and a lock nut. Right? I don't know, we'll see. gonna be awesome. So now that all the main pieces are complete, it's time to add the plywood. Now there has to be gaps between the top and the bottom plywood in the middle, because without it there'd be some interference and the pieces wouldn't move. The bottom will require a gap of 1 inch. And the top, because it has more adjustability, will require a gap of 2 inches. So I'm gonna take a straight edge or another board, put it along the side to butt these up against and screw them on, make sure it's nice and straight. All right, so now that the decks are screwed on, it's time to make the ramp adjustable. Now we laid out these holes before we started putting everything together. Why didn't we do that here? Well, that's because it's just too difficult to try to line everything up. So it's better to do that after we've got it together. However, now that we have these holes, we're just gonna use those as a guide and drill straight through. But how do we make it adjustable? Well, beforehand, I cut these blocks. 8 degrees, 12 degrees, and 16 degrees. These are gonna be our guides for the fixed angle on the adjustable lip. How this is all gonna work is we have these 4 holes here, and we're gonna use these 1/2 inch hitch pins and plug them here. This is gonna be our flat position, 8 degrees, 12 degrees, and 16 degrees. Let's start drilling with it in the flat position. Of course, we don't really need a pin when it's in its 0 degree position. That's just down. When we're hitting the ramp, we're actually putting all that pressure on the edges of the plywood, not the ramp itself. So putting the pin in will help transfer the load to the actual structure of the ramp. Now for the 8 degree blocks. Lift it up and scoot it until it's flush on the top and the bottom. And we want to make sure that we have these angle blocks on both sides before we drill, just to make sure everything is even. 12 degrees. Now the last one is 16 degrees. It might not seem like much, but I have a feeling it's gonna feel pretty poppy. If we go much beyond that, it's gonna start to buck you. Now the whole reason that I made it adjustable was so that it would store flat, but also because I ride with a group of riders that have varying degrees of ability. And if someone wants to come play bikes that doesn't jump very well, I can have it flat and have it a very predictable outcome. But then as myself and my friends progress, we can put a little bit more pop in the ramp, right? You get what I'm saying? Now because the hitch pins are a 1/2 inch and the holes are a 1/2 inch, it might be a little difficult getting them in there the first time. But the more you do it, the more you use it, the easier it will be. If it's too tight, you can ream it out with the drill bit and it'll fit better. I don't need to tell you that. That's just full of innuendo and dirtiness. This thing's done. It's time to ride it. See how it breaks down. I would like to think that I was smart enough to think of everything beforehand, but really, even though I spent a lot of time planning this thing out, there were a few things that I didn't think of adding into the last minute. Case in point, I realized that if I added some nail hooks between the lip and the folding legs, they would hold each other in place, and then I could take the hitch pins, drill a couple of 1/2 inch holes, put the pins here, and that would keep the entryway from flopping around when carrying it. Well, my name's Cody and you're watching Lunch Ride. As before, there'll be a link in the description to a set of drawings for this ramp as well as all the other projects on this channel. So if you like this video, if you thought it was helpful, hit like, subscribe,
and share with your friends. Until next time.